Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 108th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, I'd like to discuss soul growth, which is a topic I've already touched upon with some metaphors, but I'd just like to delve a little deeper into this topic. So, one of the metaphors I like to use for souls is that there's this one primordial soul, and then it just splits, just like with the logic of trees, where you have sort of an infinite fractal of that one soul that subdivides into plenty of different branches. And you could say that the human is just, every human is like a leaf on one of those branches. And then humanity is the branch, or you could say that a soul group is the branch, basically. You could say that humanity is like one of those bigger branches. And then you have within humanity different soul groups, which are the little sub branches. And each leaf is a human playing an individual part. Now, of course, there's only one soul, but the fact that the soul is split into all of these kind of subdivisions also means there are individual souls. And all of this is a sort of a system that is nested one inside the other. But the way you evolve the system is when, from its division, it starts to reassemble and re-encompass the whole through experience, basically. So it subdivides first, then it acquires experience, and it assembles itself after experience. And therefore, it gains a knowledge of itself and explores infinity in the process. Because a sort of a conscious reassembly has to be the counterpart to what I would say, an unconscious disassembly. That is the fractalization and patterns in which the soul split is not necessarily a conscious process. It's like an automated process because there's only one. The whole point is to explore infinity in the most optimal way, but then you have to sort of reassemble what you've split and go back to unity. And you have to do that through conscious reassembling. It's like a puzzle that reassembles itself consciously, where each puzzle piece is given a part of a soul, a part of that one soul. And through the experiences of trying to reassemble with other puzzle pieces, it learns something about itself and then knows sort of how to reassemble itself properly. And it just gains a lot more valuable experience. It's like math knowing itself. It's like if you threw all of the numbers, all of the equations, all jumbled up into a big bag. All of math is there, but it's an unconscious knowing of math. And then if you give a consciousness to each number, and they start interacting with each other, and they see how they should interact, and then they sort of learn about math by putting, like, shedding light on what they are as numbers. And it's like if each number had to harmonize itself with each other number and with every other number. And, like, for instance, when you do simple things like 1 plus 3, 3 has to be conscious that it's 3, 1 has to be conscious that it's 1, and therefore they will have the correct solution, which is 4 when you put them together. If 3 is not conscious that it is 3, then you'll have a problem because you won't never get to the answer. And so that's quite a simple kind of metaphor, but I think it's worth exploring. Now, the other thing that I wanted to say is when you have this branch and you have these leaves there, you could say that, so the leaves are individual humans, but just imagine that the branch is non-physical, at a level of non-physical. That is the immaterial realm. And then the leaves are in the physical realm. Now, the whole point is for infinity to explore itself in the most profound, complex, intense kind of way. And so you could say that the non physical, you could say that that's like a VR headset that you put on, like you place them over your eyes. It is an experience. You're still experiencing things, but it's much lighter. Like, for instance, in a VR game, if you're hit by an object, your brain kind of um, simulates some of the fears, some of the reflexes, motor reflexes of like moving away or dodging or whatever, but you don't have the full on physical experience. In the physical, things are much, much more intense, but there's a lot less that you can handle and a lot less room for mistakes because in VR, I mean, you can, like in video games, you can die infinitely. In the physical, you die once, you have to, reincarnate. It's a whole problematic process. And so the whole point is to be able to move as much as the non physical into the physical for a more intense, to increase the intensity of the experience, to increase also the learning or the experience itself, what you can learn from it. Because when you're in a video game, basically, where you have no limitations, or where you have infinite lives and you have, none of the limitations of the physical, well, I mean, it's just that you learn much less from the lack of limitations, um, because you can just try and die, and there's no real, how should I say, um, you try much harder when you have only one life at your disposal than when you have an infinite number of lives in a video game. You really like apply yourself. You really try not to make mistakes. You're really like really focused, and so the intensity of the experience is much bigger, and that is the whole point. And so the idea is that you could see like the human body as the most advanced VR haptic suit, basically, that we are delivering through the incarnation of like going through the Big Bang and all of the craziness, all the billions of years of evolution, and all of the different stages of evolution of the universe in a linear fashion, which is extremely limiting. Going through all the stages of evolution from like the first living cell all the way to apes and everything, all the way to the human, we are able to deliver this, to bring this like biological haptic suit into the non-physical, or actually bring the non-physical into the physical, and use this sort of biological haptic suit to experience what was before non-physical in a physical manner, which is really incredible. um, because yeah, I mean, it's just so much more immersive, more profound as an experience than the lighter experience of the non-physical. And that's why there's sort of this competition for, or this queuing up of souls to try to incarnate in the physical, is because from their vantage point, um, it is a wonderful experience, even though from our human perspective, some of us are really tired of it. And I speak from experience. Um, but how do you do that? How do you bring the non-physical into the physical? And this is where the soul growth comes into play. And what I believe is that, sorry, notifications on my phone. What I believe is that what has to happen is that you have to be able to maintain your individuality, and at the same time, from your individuality, recognize your unity, how you fit within the whole. And this is a process that has to be done by each of these parts. How it fits the individual and how it fits within the collective. And it's only once every single sort of sort of what should I say? Every single leaf or every single individual soul here, fractal, has sort of come to a point in its consciousness where it sees how its individuality relates to the whole and recognizes its belonging to the whole, that the branch that it is sitting on becomes more and more material, physical, because it is sort of fed this consciousness information from all of the leaves that sort of manifest it as a physical branch rather than a non-physical branch, if you know what I mean. Um, and then the same process has to happen with the individual branches that see how their individuality as a branch, which is of course a unity formed from the individuality of the humans. So it's like the human collective sees how it fits within the bigger branch of, say, a galactic consciousness or whatever. And again, every single one has to do this process. Every single branch, every single civilization has to do the same process. And it is the multiplicity of the unity that stems from the multiplicity of the sort of coming into consciousness of your individuality and how you fit in the collective that gets you to the next level. And so it's a individual process and a collective process simultaneously, because of course if you can do it, then it's sort of you contribute to bringing the non-physical into the physical. But it's also a collective process. It's a sum because these of course interact with each other and are related to each other a little bit. So when you are close on the same branch and you manage to do that, you're kind of, it's almost like you're inspiring. Well, the word inspiring is not correct here, but almost as if the people that are close to you, that the other leaves or the other souls, can enter into resonance with what you have done and do the same process, and so it accelerates and accelerates and accelerates exponentially. Which is why also, if you look at human development, there are a lot of exponentials in there, whether it's population growth, whether it's GDP, whether it's all kinds of things, resource use, energy, everything. And that's just a reflection of the speeding up of this whole process. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to touch upon this a little bit. It made me think of something funny, is that you could see this if you're into like doom and gloom sci-fi and you vibrate at a low frequency, you could interpret this almost as if we were harvested, our bodies were harvested like vegetables, basically, to be captured by these big, huge beings, which are non physical, in order to capture our bodies, to use them for, I don't know, having a higher experience or a physical experience, which of course is just you use a filter sort of to deform reality because you're not seeing it through the lens of, love, God, or whatever. And so you can have these narratives, and I've heard these in sci-fi movies before. This idea that we are a plant. We're like a plant that has been harvested on this planet, and soon there will be, the reapers will show up and they will just cut us, and chop us up like like lawnmowers or whatever. um, that's not really how I see things. I see it as the opposite. Actually, it's like you reuniting with part of yourself, and like accessing your higher self through this process of keeping the individual and yet um, within a collective. So I hope you found this interesting. I think that's how basically souls grow, is this inverse process where consciousness sort of streams back towards the the primordial soul, so to speak, through experience and through these creating these consciousness clusters, I guess, as you would call it, and then becoming bigger and bigger and bigger in size until um, this one soul is reflected in the whole diversity, which embraces itself as a new unity, but still keeping its individuality and diversity. So it's not like this idea of fusion, like you would lose your individuality and fuse with other people and you would no longer be separate. It is unity by keeping the separation and the individuality. Because it's almost like if this were an eye, one eye that was looking at things. You have a unique perspective, which is unconditional love on everything. But imagine having the same perspective, unconditional love, but with a near infinite set of eyes. Like every soul here is like one individual eye that is staring back at itself, instead of having just this one eye looking at everything. You have an infinite number of eyes that see the same thing, and yet they see it in much more, much more with a much more complexity, much more richness. I don't really know how to what kind of terms would be adequate here, but you get the picture, I think. And so it's the same. It's the same perspective. It's just that it's much richer in terms of the experience. So I hope you found this interesting, and talk to you in the next video.